Welcome to Ask the Attorney, brought to you by the Law Office of Chris Doskotch.
And good evening to you. I'm Eric Reed. The topic on our last program about a month ago was workers' compensation. That's the insurance that provides wage replacement and medical benefits to employees who are injured on the job, and in exchange, the worker gives up their right to sue the company for negligence. We knew this would be a great subject, but we were on against the Cubs playoff game, so we were like, what if no one calls? Lo and behold, we had a record number of calls. We thank you. The calls were coming in after we signed off. So tonight, Workers' Comp 2.0, there is new information to cover. And of course, we're going to be taking your phone calls. The number 309-698-3742, 698-3742. And with us again to tackle Workers' Comp attorney Chris Doskotch. He's been in practice for over 20 years. His offices are on Knoxville in Peoria. Great to have you back.
Well, thank you very much.
Before we get into a lot of the nuts and bolts, let me ask you a question, because this is a historic day in Illinois with medical marijuana now available. The Salveo dispensary is open and camp people there today. 200 people are registered. Is medical marijuana covered at all in workers' comp? If somebody has some type of an injury or ailment that came up on the job, is that going to be allowed in the
Don't we
treatment?
start out with easy questions? But
Sorry, it's newsy.
It is. It's a very difficult question. It's legal, but a lot of employers have policies against drug use in the workplace. So if it's legal, can an employer have that type of policy and enforce it against you? Is it an acceptable form of medication? If it's prescribed by a doctor, it's reasonable and necessary.
Right.
A lot of people feel that it is better for you than taking high-powered addictive narcotics that have much greater side effects.
Absolutely.
If it makes you feel better and you function better, is it appropriate medically? You know, there's a lot of issues. There's never been any cases on it, and so the law is out there, and it's going to be up to the courts, whether in workers' compensation or in civil courts, to kind of answer some of these very, very difficult questions.
And it is a changing world, especially with workers' comp, because a lot of things changed earlier this year. The payout, I should say, lessened. Right. But Illinois is kind of screwy when it comes to the payout and also the premium. And we have some charts here that we want to show. And the first one is going to deal with the average payout. This is what the employee will get.
Well, one of the things we talked about, and then there was an article in Crain's about reductions in workers' compensation. As you can see in that chart, the Illinois' medical payments to physicians has gone down below all of our neighbors. 14,000, the highest in change is Indiana at 18,000. So the effect of reducing the fee schedule and what you pay doctors through the statute and the changes had its effect. You can see it in the numbers.
And now our next chart is going to illustrate really the toll it is taking on the state of Illinois.
Right, and there's another graphic that we had
Right.
too about the AMA or the medical reduction. But this chart here shows that Illinois' insurance premiums are not reducing at the rate that you would see on the medical expenses
Right.
or the payouts in the case. So Illinois, for example, in manufacturing is still at 12.9%. Look at Indiana at 3.9%. And what did I talk about last time was the people that aren't at the table right now in Springfield for work comp reform is the premium, the insurance companies and premium regulation.
So it's not really that the premium has gone up, but the ratio between the payoff and then the premium has widened significantly.
If you reduce the payouts for the amount that you get at the end of the case, you reduce the amount of money that you're paying the doctors or physicians, you would expect there to be a reduction in the premium that is greater than what we've seen. But there's no premium regulation in the state. They are not, the insurance companies aren't being brought into this negotiation and this work comp, what some want to call reform, but they're really changes.
It seems to me that if a company has to have workers' comp, and if somebody gets injured on the job, it would behoove the company to offer the workers' comp to the employee, because that way the employee can't come back and sue for negligence. Does that usually happen, that a company makes the offer, or does the employee usually go and approach the company?
Well, some companies have policies where they are proactive. They send you to the medical department. They want to control the medical, so they take a proactive approach. Some companies don't mention it at all and don't want you to bring it up. Some companies want to push you to group insurance. You know, every company is different. I agree with you. Take care of your employee right away. Get them the care they need. Get them back to work. They're going to be more productive. But does that happen in reality? You know, a lot of times the answer to that is
And
no.
we'll expand on all that in just a moment, but calls are coming in, and that's what the show is all about. Christopher, you are on the line. Good evening to you. What is your question for Chris Scotch?
My question is, I have a daughter that's a manager at a department store, and she had a stroke on the job.
Okay.
Stressed out over the extra duties that they gave her.
So the
Okay.
stress caused the stroke,
Stroke.
and now you're wondering if that comes under the workers' comp?
Yeah, well, they tell her, she told me that they told her that she doesn't qualify for workers'
Okay.
comp, and I want to know if that's true.
Well, I can help you out with that, and this is a very common question with strokes and heart attacks. Ordinary job stress is not enough to make it a case. So if you have a very stressful job and it's typical for that job, it's not. But if you have extraordinary stress, like if you were sent outside, for example, shoveling in very cold snow and you normally don't shovel and have a heart attack or a stroke, that would be covered. In a case like this, you need two things on stroke or heart attack cases. You need to know specifically what are the extra duties that you were under. And then you have to have a physician that's willing to say, those extra duties are one of the causative factors, because almost everyone that has a stroke or heart attack is going to have some premorbid or
Right, or
comorbid
genetic.
problems, genetic problems. But if your physician's willing to stand up for you and say that your work activities that were above and beyond what you normally do in general, then I think you could have a potential case.
So it's a lot easier to tell if you had a physical accident of some type to get workers' comp than if it's a stress-related, led to a stroke type
And
of
that's one
situation.
important thing is, and it's all pre-existing conditions, it has to be a cause or an aggravating. It doesn't have to be the only cause or the sole cause. So that's the standard that we go by.
Okay, Christopher, I hope that helped you. Thank you for calling.
Thank you for
Tonight we
calling.
have Debbie on the line. And Debbie, you have a question about carpal tunnel.
Yes, I do.
Go ahead.
So I have carpal tunnel, and I filed a workers' comp claim. I was sent to an independent doctor, and after about a month, I received a response back that although he concurred that I do have carpal tunnel, he said it was not work-related and that it was degenerative. And I'm really not sure if there's anything else I can do.
Well, let me ask, what do you do on the job that might have led to carpal tunnel being an affliction from work?
I work on a computer all day. I have
Okay.
for the last 25 years.
Yep,
Okay.
I can definitely help you with that question because it's very typical. I've done very well with cases and proving that data entry and typing and carpal tunnel those types of activities are an aggravating or causative factor. You know, and Debbie, your situation's very typical where they send you to a doctor, they say it's not work related. There is some controversy in medicine right now where some doctors will say that carpal tunnel didn't come from typing. I don't think the medical literature in the long run supports that, but there are many doctors that believe it does. I've seen it in my practice that so many people that type, you rest your wrists on a hard surface, you're using your hands repetitively, that it could aggravate carpal tunnel. Degenerative reason for carpal tunnel is not a very good reason to say it's not really a degenerative condition. I mean, there are other causes. And just remember, because the work comp sends you to a physician, that doesn't mean that's the end-all be-all. Your doctor has a say. Consult with a lawyer, myself, any lawyer, to talk about this and find out. You don't have to just take what their doctor says.
Okay, quick question before we take a break. Is workers' comp check taxable? That's a question from Joan. Does your money that you get from workers' comp, the payout, is that taxable?
Neither one. The weekly checks that you get is tax-free, it's at 2/3, and your settlement at the end of the case is also tax-free, nothing reported, you don't get a 1099. It's one of the few things where there are no taxes.
All right. or live in Florida or Nevada. We'll be back with Chris Dostotch, much more on workers' comp. Please give us a call, 698-3742. We're here to give you advice and help you. He is, I don't know anything. And we'll be back in a moment. Welcome back to Ask the Attorney. We are with Chris Dostotch, the attorney from Knoxville and Peoria. 20 years of practice, does a lot of workers' comp work, and it's a complicated subject.
Yeah, thank you.
And
Thanks
that's
for having
why
me
Chris
back.
is here, absolutely. And Kimberly is on the line, and she's got a question about her husband. Kimberly, good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. My husband got hurt at work, and he tore his meniscus in his knee. And he got workman's comp. He went to a surgeon. He had surgery, and they put him through some rehab, and they got him back to work. And he's been back to work for 2 weeks now, but he's not 100%. He has a limp.
Okay.
He's a little unsteady. He's not 100%. So he was 100% before he hurt himself. Now he's back to work. What do we do now?
Okay. Well,
What
this
percent would you say he's back at if he was 100% before? In
Well,
your
he could
opinion.
walk with
Okay.
no limp before, and he didn't
Yeah.
have pain or swelling.
Okay. Well, Kimberly, thanks for the call. This is a common issue too, and this is what I tell every client. After you've had a surgery, or even if you haven't had a surgery, when you get back to work, the true test is how you do. And you don't settle your case, you don't resolve your case until you're sure that you're as good as you're going to be and nothing else can be done. So in this situation, the meniscus is the cushion, it's the shock absorber of the knee. And sometimes it could flare up also arthritis and other things in the knee. So before I would settle this case or resolve it, I think it's very important that you return to your physician and let the physician know what you're experiencing and how it's going before you do anything. Because the doctor releases you doesn't mean that your right to go back to the doctor is
How
done.
many people have you seen go back to work too soon because they're afraid there will be ramifications at work if they stay out, even if they're not doing 100% yet?
Constantly, because the worker wants you back, the employer wants you back being productive. They want to get you back as quick as you can. It's a very typical scenario, but even though you're back to work again, that doesn't mean you give up the right to go to the doctor. Thanks for your call, Kimberly, and I hope that helped you out.
All right, and we have Roberta on the line right now. Roberta, what is your question for Chris
Good evening.
Dostotch tonight?
When you have a job injury, is workman's comp responsible for all of your medical bills?
Yes, I mean, in general, the answer, Roberta, is they have to pay any reasonable, necessary, and medical bills related to your accident. So if you have an injury, you get therapy, the doctor says you need it, it helps you, generally, yes. Now, frequently, the insurance companies will have a utilization review or critique the medical to try and not pay the bills. I'm frequently going to court to get all of the bills paid. But under the law, if it's related to treatment from a work injury, they should be paying.
How many people who get injured at work and believe they should file workers' comp won't because they're afraid there will be, some problems with their company, and then they try to do this on their own insurance because they're fearful of any ramifications
Well,
or
kind of
discipline.
relating into this question here,
Yeah.
you do have your group insurance if work comp denies payment, so you should always put them on notice just in case, and that's very typical. And I don't browbeat clients and say you got to sign, you need a lawyer. You should get a lawyer. If you're especially going to have surgery or miss time for work, you should. But I'm not in your workplace, in your life situation, and there's a lot of people afraid right now when you have layoffs and other things going on and you got bills to pay. You don't want to rock the boat. So I would say, again, that's a business by business.
Right. But they can't let you go just because you filed a workers' comp claim, but they might look at you differently?
Well, I mean, it could affect all kinds of different things, and the law says they can't let you go, but the number of employers that say that isn't, you know, they don't come out and tell you that, so it's kind of what you call the chilling effect. And, you know, it's illegal. Most employers follow the law and they don't do that, but that's not everyone.
Right. All right. We have John on the line right now. John, what is your question for Chris?
Yes, I tore my meniscus, and I believe it's compensable. However, the Illinois Department of Public Aid paid most of all my medical bills.
Okay.
And I was wondering if the employer is required to pay my medical bills, whether or not I would be able to receive that payment, or if I'd have to pay the state back in any way.
Okay, well, in any type of settlement, and thank you for that question, you have three things, the main things I can do at the beginning of a case. Get you paid for being off work. So if you had lost time for work, you can make a claim for that, claim for medical bills, and a claim for settlement. Okay, now if Medicaid paid the bills, they have what's called a super lien. So if you get a settlement from workers' compensation, you do need to reimburse Medicaid.
So you don't get paid twice.
So, you know, so Medicaid gets their money back, but at the same time, you would also be entitled to a settlement in addition to paying back Medicaid. So, like you said, you thought your case was compensable. If it is compensable, they would be responsible to pay Medicaid back, but also you would be entitled to get a settlement as well.
This can be a little rough waters to navigate by yourself.
Very much so, yeah. You have to have a lawyer in that situation.
All right, let me give you a question from George here. How many days do I have to report an injury? I was laid off and my hands are numb. I think I have carpal tunnel. Can I still report this injury? So the injury happened while they were working and then they got laid off.
Right, and I see this a lot.
This might happen at Caterpillar.
Let's give Caterpillar,
Yeah.
Mitsubishi.
Yep.
You're November 30th, you know, in a, you know, terrible situation. A lot of people work there a long time. You're using air tools. You're working repetitively. If you leave in November, you go to the doctor in January and your hands are numb, you could still, as long as you're within, you have to report it within 45 days of your date of accident. So if the manifestation, let's say you go to the doctor on January 15th, get diagnosed with carpal tunnel, you need to report it within 45 days of that time. Obviously, if you haven't worked there since November 30th, the closer that you get treatment to when you ended work, the better. If you wait 2 years, then they're going to say, what have you been doing the last 2 years?
Right.
And, you know, after 3 years, there's not a case. So if you're having symptoms from your job and you've been laid off, I suggest that you get treatment as soon as possible to see if it's work-related.
All right, this is a question from Dell. Was on workers' comp for 6 months. Tore 3 tendons and had surgery. Didn't get first check for 44 days, and 50% they said was calculated on previous year's wage. Is that proper?
Okay, no and no. Okay?
Okay.
First, they're supposed to pay you within 14 days, just like at work. We get paid bi-monthly at work, twice a month. So if you start off work on the 1st of the month, you should have a work comp check for that first week by the 14th.
So they were basically a month late.
Right, and you can get penalties. Yeah, I think it's $30 a day for late payment. And then regarding the wages and how it's calculated, it's 2/3 of your earnings, not 50%,
Okay.
based upon the year's earnings before. But there are a lot of special rules on how you calculate that. It's not just that simple. You know, you may be a seasonal union worker, and so you didn't work 2 months. Well, those weeks shouldn't count. You might have been on vacation. So it's not always just take the gross and divide by the number of weeks. But that's the general parameters for it.
Okay, we're going to take a break. We're going to be back with more of your questions with Chris Dostocz, attorney at law, in just a moment. Talking about workers' compensation with attorney Chris Doskach from Peoria, in practice for over 20 years. Here's a question from Jeff. He's currently getting workers' comp pay, but the benefits are not included. Why not?
Okay, Jeff, because workers' compensation, Section 12 of our, or Section 10 of our Work Comp Act excludes fringe benefits. So retirement, health insurance, those types of benefits are not included in your calculation. The employer does not have to pay that while you're off work. I can give you 2 examples. For example, Caterpillar, I believe that this is still the case. When you're off on workers' compensation, you need to make sure you keep sending in your premium for your portion, or you could lose your insurance. And I face this question a lot with union workers that have pension, health, and welfare, and they have to have so many hours per year to qualify for health. So if you're off work for a year and you haven't worked, you're going to lose your health benefit for you and your family, and that's a serious problem, and you cannot make an employer pay. They are not obligated to pay that. And the same thing, so if you go out on workers' compensation, also you're not getting contributions towards your pension or retirement. So, you know, 2/3 isn't, you know, it's good, but it's not the same as, you know, getting back to work. And, you know, that's why most of the workers want to get back to work, because they're missing out not just on their regular wages, but all these other benefits.
All right, this is from Clara. Had surgery on her shoulder in 2010. How do they determine how long you're off work?
Okay.
Or is that just individual because of your doctor?
I mean, that would be individual. There's no time limit. I had a client in a case that settled this year that had been off work since 1999, 27 surgeries. And the person was getting treatment, and it was all paid for. But some people have shoulder surgery, they're back to work in 3 months. It's a very individual situation. It depends on how you respond to the treatment, and that's a case-by-case basis.
Okay, Stan's got an interesting question here. He broke his elbow at work. Workers' comp was paying, but the company wanted him on FMLA, which is what?
Family Medical Leave Act?
Okay. Was that a scare tactic by the company?
No, because FMLA, which was put into effect to give workers protection and 12 weeks off, the employer has to have, I think it's 20 or more employees, and you have to work over 1,000 hours. I might be off a little bit, but in general, I'd have to look that up to qualify for FMLA. And if you qualify, then for any serious medical condition, you can be get up to 12 weeks off work. Well, some employers decided to use that as a sword instead of a shield for the worker, and say once that 12 weeks is up, you're out the door. So a lot of employers will make employees off on work comp because it's a serious medical condition, use their FMLA concurrently with their workers' compensation. That is something you definitely want to check into your company manual or handbook on what they require. But as far as the law says, the employer can do that if they enforce that policy uniformly for everyone.
Okay, simple question here from Heather. What is the law about a slip and fall at work? You're walking along, boom, you go down, maybe there's water on the floor.
Well, I'd say to be continued, because that is one of, with carpal tunnel and typing, that's one of the hotbeds right now that the judges are dealing with. Generally, if you fall at work doing a work task, it's work related. But if you fall due to a defect or something wrong, it's work related. Some of the cases where you just trip on the stairs and you don't know why, or you fall and you don't know why, or you fall on ice in a parking lot that's not maintained or controlled by your employer, there could be some questions about that.
So you have some reasonable expectation that they're maintaining the property.
Correct. And or you have to have a work-related purpose with it. So I think it's important when you fall to make sure you report what caused it.
Okay, I just want to move this along a little bit because we're running short of time, amazingly. Daughter drives at forklift. This is from Shelley. And then she sat down at her desk and the chair broke. Is workers' comp going to help with that? Or will the company pay her because it was their chair?
Okay, yeah, the chair broke and you're doing your job.
Yeah.
Or that's a case and they're responsible for their own equipment and your injury. That's definitely a case.
Okay, let me go to Leonard here. A business pays him cash.
Okay.
Would he be covered? They do have workers' comp, but he gets paid cash, so there's no records or timesheets. of his employment.
Well, Leonard, what I would say in this situation is you are covered. Obviously, the issue you're going to have is, have you been paying 1099 taxes on your earnings? Because they may bring that issue up. But employment status is not determined by a W-2. It's about control. And are you doing functions essential for the business? So if you have a window cleaning business, you can't have that without having window cleaners. So you can't just give them cash and say they're not employees. So in that case, you can be an employee with cash, but it's a little bit tricky.
All right, quick answer on this. Patty asks, how does Social Security affect workers' comp?
It's the other way around. Workers'
Okay.
comp can affect Social Security and reduce your Social Security payment. And if you're on Medicare, it can affect how you settle a case. They're called Medicare set-asides, and how medical is taken care of. But work comp's not reduced by Social Security. It's the other way around.
Okay, very quick. Sharon, how long can a person get their medical bills paid on workers' comp?
As long as their case
As
is
long
open.
as it takes.
As long as their case is open and their doctor says it's reasonable and necessary.
Christo Scotch, attorney at law in Cleveland.
Cleveland.
I used to live in Cleveland. Peoria, thank you so much for being
Thanks
here.
again.
All right,
Everybody have a
and
good night.
hopefully we helped you with these workers' comp questions that you had, and we'll be back with Chris again in December. Until then, have a great evening.
Have a
It's
good
been
night.
pleasure.